The morning in Glendale began with a deceptive calm that felt almost too perfect, as if the universe was holding its breath before unleashing something unexpected. The sky shimmered an unnervingly bright blue, and the sunlight reflected off every surface like shards of glass, blindingly beautiful yet strangely cold. A sudden gust of wind swept through the streets, sending chills down the spines of those who noticed it, though most were too preoccupied to care. For me, Michael Carter, mornings had always been my sanctuary, a time when Zeus and I could sit quietly at our favorite café, sipping coffee while the world buzzed around us. But today, there was something different, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The café was alive with noise, laughter, clinking cups, hurried footsteps, but beneath it all, there was an undercurrent of unease. It wasn't loud enough for everyone to notice, but some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats or exchanged wary glances. Beside me, Zeus stood rigid, his body tense like a coiled spring ready to snap. His piercing eyes scanned the crowd with precision, dotting from face to face as though he were reading secrets hidden behind each smile. If I could see, I imagine I would have noticed what Zeus already sensed, the subtle shift in energy, the way certain individuals carried themselves with a quiet menace. I ran my fingers absent-mindedly along Zeus's leash, feeling the faint tremor in his muscles. He wasn't just standing, he was guarding. Every instinct in his powerful frame screamed vigilance. "What is it, boy?" I whispered softly, leaning closer to him. Zeus didn't respond, but his low growl rumbled deep in his chest, barely audible over the din of conversation. That sound alone sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. Something was coming, something bad, and Zeus knew it long before anyone else did. Michael Carter might have been blind, but his other senses were razor-sharp, honed by years of navigating a world that often underestimated him. His fingers traced the grooves of Zeus's leash with practiced ease, feeling every subtle shift in tension, a twitch, a pull, or even the faintest tremor that signaled something amiss. To those who didn't know him, it seemed almost supernatural how Michael could sense changes in the atmosphere around him. But he wasn't relying on intuition alone. Zeus was his compass, his sixth sense, and perhaps even more a silent guardian whose instincts had saved them both countless times before. Zeus's tranquility of the morning was shattered in an instant as 3 motorcycles roared to a stop just outside the café. The deafening growl of their engines sliced through the peaceful hum of conversation like a knife, leaving behind an eerie silence that hung heavily in the air. Heads turned abruptly, and every pair of eyes, curious, alarmed, or outright fearful, locked onto the trio of bikers now dismounting from their machines. Chuck led the group, his boots hitting the pavement with deliberate force, each step echoing like a warning bell. His leather jacket, adorned with patches depicting skulls and flames, seemed designed not just to intimidate but to proclaim dominance over anyone who dared cross his path. The tattoos snaking up his arms only added to the effect. They weren't mere decorations but badges of recklessness, stories etched into skin. What struck Michael most wasn't what he could hear, it was how Zeus reacted. The German shepherd's entire body stiffened beside him, muscles coiling tightly under his fur. "Zeus?" Michael murmured softly, his fingers instinctively tightening around the leash. Though blind, Michael had learned to read Zeus's behavior like Braille, and right now, every fiber of the dog's being screamed danger. Around them, whispers began to ripple through the crowd. A child sitting at a nearby table let out a piercing scream when she caught sight of Chuck's towering figure and menacing glare. Her mother quickly pulled her close, whispering reassurances while casting nervous glances toward the bikers. The scene felt surreal, a once idyllic cafe transformed into something out of a tense thriller. Chuck didn't seem bothered by the attention. If anything, he thrived on it. With a cocky grin plastered across his face, he surveyed the area as though claiming it for himself. His gaze lingered on Zeus longer than necessary, his lips curling into a smirk that sent shivers down the spines of those watching. "Big dog you've got there," he called out, his voice dripping with mockery. It wasn't a compliment, it was a challenge. Zeus didn't respond with a bark or even a twitch, but his posture spoke volumes. He stood firm, his broad chest puffed out, guarding Michael with unwavering resolve. Even without seeing, Michael could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them both. The atmosphere shifted palpably, charged with tension so thick it felt suffocating. People exchanged uneasy glances, some discreetly reaching for their phones to capture the unfolding drama. One man muttered under his breath, "This isn't going to end well." Another woman clutched her coffee cup tightly, her knuckles whitening as she watched Chuck swagger closer, his confidence bordering on arrogance. For Michael, this sudden intrusion was more than unsettling. It was a stark reminder of how fragile peace could be. And yet, standing beside him, Zeus exuded strength and loyalty, a living shield prepared to face whatever came next. For all his imposing stature, moved with an elegance that belied his strength. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd like a seasoned soldier surveying a battlefield, hyper-aware of every movement, every shadow. He wasn't just any guide dog, far from it. Years spent as part of a canine unit had taught him to detect danger long before it revealed itself. Where others saw only ordinary patrons sipping coffee, Zeus identified potential threats hidden beneath forced smiles and casual gestures. The tension radiating off the group of bikers hadn't escaped his notice. Every laugh, every glance, they meant something. And Zeus knew better than anyone what they could mean if left unchecked. Nearby, an elderly woman leaned closer to her companion, her voice barely above a whisper. "That dog," she murmured, nodding toward Zeus. "He doesn't act like a regular service animal. Look at him, he's watching everything." Her friend squinted, then nodded slowly. "You're right," she replied, her tone tinged with awe. "He looks like he's ready to pounce. Like a bodyguard." The comment lingered in the air, unnoticed by Michael but palpable to those observing. What they couldn't see, however, was the bond between man and beast, a connection forged not just through training but through shared experiences of survival. Michael trusted Zeus implicitly, knowing that the German Shepherd's loyalty ran deeper than duty. They weren't merely master and pet. They were partners, equals in their own unique way. When Zeus stiffened beside him, Michael instinctively tightened his grip on the leash, not out of fear, but out of readiness. Something was coming. He couldn't see it yet, but he could feel it in the way Zeus's muscles coiled under his fur, in the low vibration of his growl that rumbled louder with each passing second. As the morning sun cast long shadows across the café patio, Michael found himself reflecting on the life they'd built together. Before Zeus, he'd relied solely on his cane and the kindness of strangers. Now he had a protector whose instincts were as sharp as any blade. Those instincts had once guided Zeus through war zones, drug busts, and hostage situations, scenarios far deadlier than anything this quaint little town had ever seen. Yet here they were, facing down a group of rowdy bikers whose intentions remained shrouded in uncertainty. If push came to shove, Michael knew one thing for certain: Zeus wouldn't hesitate to put himself in harm's way. Because that's what guardians did. That's what family did. The tension between Zeus and Chuck escalated with each passing second, the air thickening like a storm about to break. Zeus let out a low rumble, his growl reverberating through the café patio, a primal warning that sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. The sound wasn't loud, but its weight carried an unmistakable message. This was no ordinary dog, and he was not to be trifled with. Around them, the once bustling crowd began to thin as people stood up abruptly, abandoning their drinks mid-sip. Some whispered nervously into their phones while others simply fled, unwilling to witness what might come next. Chuck, however, seemed unfazed by the growing unease. With deliberate slowness, he raised his hand toward Zeus, his fingers splayed in mockery. It wasn't just a gesture, it was a calculated provocation, a direct challenge to the German Shepherd's authority. Zeus reacted instantly, his body coiling like a spring under high pressure. His lips curled back slightly, revealing gleaming teeth, and another guttural growl escaped his throat, louder this time, more menacing. The woman who had earlier confronted Chuck now shouted across the space, her voice sharp with urgency. "Don't touch that dog. He'll bite." Her words hung in the air, but Chuck dismissed them with a sneer, his laughter cutting through the tension like shards of glass. Michael, though unable to see, felt the shift in energy around him. His grip on Zeus's leash tightened instinctively, his knuckles whitening as he tried to maintain control. "Zeus, easy," he murmured softly, his voice steady but laced with concern. Yet Zeus didn't relax. Every muscle in his powerful frame remained taut, ready to act at a moment's notice. Chuck leaned forward slightly, his smirk widening as if daring the dog to make a move. The standoff was electric, the kind of charged silence that precedes chaos. Zeus's eyes never wavered from Chuck's face, his gaze piercing and unrelenting, as if silently promising retribution for any further aggression. Michael's fingers tightened reflexively around Zeus's leash as he felt the subtle tremors radiating through the leather strap. The dog's breathing had grown heavier, almost labored, and his body was taut like a coiled spring ready to explode at any moment. "Zeus," Michael whispered, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to stay calm. "What's going on, boy?" His words hung in the air, unanswered but heavy with unease. Though blind, Michael could sense the shift in energy around them, the way silence seemed to ripple outward from their table, replacing the once bustling chatter of the café. He didn't need sight to know that something was terribly wrong. Zeus's behavior told him everything he needed to know. Nearby, an elderly man leaned closer to his companion, his voice barely audible over the growing tension. "That guy's playing with fire," he muttered under his breath, nodding toward Chuck. "If I were him, I'd steer clear of that dog. Something about it. It doesn't feel right." His friend nodded slowly, her eyes wide with apprehension as she watched Zeus stand firm between Michael and Chuck. The German shepherd's imposing frame created an impenetrable barrier, his muscles rippling beneath his fur as though every instinct in his body screamed readiness for action. Zeus wasn't just standing guard, he was preparing for war. The weight of the moment pressed down on Michael like a storm cloud, thick and suffocating. He couldn't see Chuck's smug grin or the way his friends egged him on with mocking laughter, but he could hear the edge in their voices, the underlying menace that made his stomach churn. Zeus shifted slightly, his paws digging into the pavement as if anchoring himself against some invisible force. Michael ran his free hand along the dog's back, searching for reassurance even as his own heart raced. "Easy, buddy," he murmured, though the quiver in his tone betrayed his fear. Zeus responded by lowering his head slightly, his sharp teeth glinting faintly in the sunlight. It wasn't aggression, not yet, but a clear warning, one that anyone who understood dogs would recognize immediately. To Michael, Zeus was more than a protector. He was a lifeline, a connection to the world beyond his blindness. And now, more than ever, Michael trusted him completely. Still, the uncertainty clawed at him. What did Zeus sense that he couldn't? Was this just a harmless confrontation spiraling out of control, or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface? As the standoff continued, the atmosphere grew heavier, charged with unspoken threats. People began to whisper nervously, their gazes darting between Zeus and Chuck. Some reached for their phones, capturing the scene as if expecting violence to erupt at any second. Michael felt isolated in the chaos, reliant solely on Zeus's instincts to guide him through whatever came next. The realization hit him hard. They weren't just facing a reckless biker. They were confronting someone who underestimated the bond between man and beast. And that mistake might cost him dearly. The tension that had been simmering like a pot on the verge of boiling finally erupted in a single, explosive moment. Chuck, his pride wounded and his ego bruised, lashed out impulsively, kicking a nearby chair with enough force to send it skidding across the pavement directly toward Zeus. The metallic screech of the chair scraping against the ground pierced through the air, sharp and deafening, causing several customers to flinch in shock. Zeus reacted instantly, his reflexes honed from years of training. With a swift, calculated leap, he sidestepped the flying chair, landing gracefully yet firmly on all fours. But this wasn't just an act of avoidance, it was a declaration. Zeus's deep, guttural growl rumbled through the café patio, reverberating like thunder and silencing the scattered chatter around them. Panic rippled through the crowd as people scrambled to their feet, some shouting in alarm while others fled outright, desperate to escape the escalating confrontation. The once bustling café now resembled a scene of chaos, with spilled drinks and overturned chairs littering the ground. Amid the pandemonium, Chuck advanced further, his lips curled into a sneer that dripped with disdain. "So, a dog thinks it can stand up to me?" he taunted, his voice dripping with mockery as if daring Zeus to make another move. His arrogance seemed to fill the space, suffocating any remnants of calm that remained. Zeus didn't hesitate. In response to Chuck's provocation, he let out a bark so loud and commanding that it froze everyone, including Chuck, in their tracks. For a split second, time itself seemed to stop. The air was thick with tension, every eye fixed on the German shepherd whose stance radiated both power and purpose. Even those who had fled paused mid-step, turning back to witness the standoff. Michael, though unable to see, felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He tightened his grip on Zeus's leash, his knuckles white as he tried to maintain control. "Easy, Zeus," he murmured, though his voice betrayed his unease. Chuck's bravado faltered for a brief moment. His smirk faltered slightly as he registered the intensity in Zeus's gaze. The dog wasn't merely reacting, he was challenging, asserting dominance in a way that no one could ignore. Around them, whispers broke out among the remaining patrons. "That dog means business," someone muttered under their breath. Another added, "I've never seen anything like it." Despite the growing fear in the air, Zeus stood resolute, his body coiled like a spring, ready to defend at a moment's notice. It was clear to everyone present. This wasn't just a random altercation, it was a clash of wills, a battle between man and beast with Michael caught squarely in the middle. Michael rose slowly, his voice cutting through the tension like ice. "I think it's time for you to leave," he said, each word deliberate and sharp. Chuck hesitated, his jaw tightening with barely contained fury, but the weight of the crowd's disapproving stares bore down on him. With a muttered curse, he signaled to his friends, and they retreated reluctantly, their boots scraping against the pavement. Zeus remained unyielding, his piercing gaze locked onto Chuck until the biker disappeared around the corner. The German shepherd's body stayed coiled, ready for any sudden threat, as if silently vowing that he wouldn't let his guard down again. When Michael and Zeus returned home, the tension that had simmered throughout the day only grew thicker. Zeus, usually calm and composed, began pacing restlessly around the apartment, his nose pressed against every crack in the walls and windows as if searching for something invisible to Michael. "What is it, Zeus?" Michael murmured, his voice laced with unease. The dog's behavior was unusual, even for him, his movements sharp, deliberate, as though he were tracing the scent of danger itself. Michael ran his fingers along the familiar contours of the furniture, trying to steady his racing thoughts. Was Chuck still out there? Had he followed them? The questions gnawed at him relentlessly. As night fell, the silence outside seemed deafening until it wasn't. A distant rumble of motorcycle engines shattered the quiet, growing louder with each passing second. Zeus sprang to attention, his entire body rigid, hackles raised like bristling steel. His deep bark echoed through the small apartment, a warning that sent chills down Michael's spine. Clutching his phone, Michael's hands trembled as he dialed 911. "Someone's outside," he stammered into the receiver, his voice barely above a whisper. Zeus stood firm by the door, growling low and unrelenting, his eyes fixed on the entrance as though daring anyone to cross the threshold. Michael backed away, gripping Zeus's leash tightly, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Every creak of the floorboards outside felt like footsteps drawing closer. For the first time in years, Michael felt truly vulnerable, but not alone. Beside him, Zeus remained an unwavering shield, ready to face whatever came next. The wail of police sirens sliced through the tense night air as two officers arrived at Michael's apartment. Zeus, ever vigilant, stood by the door, his body rigid and ears perked, as though ready to confront any threat that dared cross the threshold. The officers swept the area, their flashlights cutting through the shadows outside. Though they found no trace of Chuck or his gang, something near the window caught their attention, a large footprint pressed into the damp soil, along with a torn piece of fabric snagged on a nail protruding from the frame. "Looks like someone tried to break in," one officer muttered grimly. Michael felt a chill run down his spine as he processed the implications. The lead officer turned to Michael, his expression grave. "You need to be careful," he warned, his voice low but firm. "This guy isn't the type to give up easily. He's unpredictable, and that makes him dangerous." Michael nodded, gripping Zeus's leash tightly, feeling the dog's muscles still coiled beneath his fur. The officer added, "We'll increase patrols around here, but if you feel unsafe, don't hesitate to leave for the night. Your safety is the priority." As the officers departed, the weight of their words settled over Michael like a suffocating blanket. Zeus remained stationed by the door, his growl soft but persistent, as if reminding Michael that danger hadn't truly passed. The mangled fabric and ominous footprint were proof enough Chuck wasn't just testing boundaries. He was planning something far more sinister. And Zeus, with his unyielding instincts, seemed to know it before anyone else did. Michael tightened his grip on Zeus's leash, his voice steady but laced with resolve. "We're not letting him hurt us," he said, his words cutting through the heavy silence of the room. "If we have to fight, we will." Zeus lay at his feet, his massive frame coiled like a spring, every muscle taut with readiness. His eyes remained wide open, unblinking, as if daring the darkness outside to make a move. The bond between man and beast was palpable, a silent vow of protection and loyalty. Even in the face of uncertainty, they stood united, an unbreakable team ready to face whatever came next. Zeus was more than a guide dog. He was a symbol of unwavering loyalty, sacrifice, and resilience. Through every tense moment, whether facing Chuck's menacing presence or standing guard against unseen threats, Zeus proved that his bond with Michael transcended duty. Their connection wasn't forged by training alone, but by trust, love, and shared battles. The story underscores that no challenge is insurmountable when hearts are united. Even in the darkest hours, the unbreakable bond between human and animal became their shield, reminding us all that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the will to face it together.